Today, we're talking tree collards. If you've been interested in growing and learning more about tree collards, you've come to the right place. I recently had a chance to sit down with Sequoiah from Project Tree Collard. Sequoiah specializes in growing tree collards and does breeding work, breeding different varieties of tree collards. We run the gamut of topics in this conversation, everything from eating tree collards to management to propagation, and a little bit about the business Project Tree Collard. Be sure to check out the links in this video's description to connect with Sequoiah after the show and to buy tree collard plants, really quality plants. The links to her Facebook, Instagram, and her website, projecttreecollard.org. I learned a lot with my conversation with Sequoiah, and I think you will too. So let's get right into it. All right, welcome to the Permaculture Nursery Podcast, your place for insights, discoveries, and conversations about entrepreneurship, plant propagation, and a whole lot more. I'm Ben Mardis, owner of Wild Sprout Nursery, a permaculture nursery out in northwestern Washington State. Welcome to the show. Today I have Sequoiah with Project Tree Collard. Sequoiah has been gardening since she was 5. She grew up on a 2-acre homestead in the Bay Area with chicken, goats, and her own vegetable patch. So she's been in this whole gardening world since she was just a kid. She fell in love with plant propagation and soil science while studying permaculture and landscape design at Merritt College, which followed with it was a 20-year career in garden design. Sequoiah, a long run there. Okay. And then in 2015, she co-founded Project Tree Collard after realizing how resilient and abundant these plants were, no matter the season. Now based in Grass Valley, California, she's focused on breeding even better tree collard varieties, propagating medicinal herbs, all while adapting her farm to the extremes of the Sierra foothills. And for you listeners, I've been interested in tree collards for a number of years, but last year I decided to actually start growing them. And when I was looking online, I was really surprised on how hard it was to find tree collards. Not a whole lot of people were selling them, and those that were often sold out. And that's when I stumbled upon Project Tree Collard. And I think I bought quite a bit of plant material from you. And I had a high success rate with the cuttings, and I also bought plant starts. And I probably have about 25 to 30 plants now out there doing their thing. So that's pretty exciting. And so if you're looking for quality tree collards, starts or cuttings or seeds to grow out this year, be sure to check out Sequoiah's website at projecttreecollard.org and order tree collards from her. Some really high quality plant material there. All right, so Sequoiah, thanks so much for coming on today. We had a chance to talk a little bit in the past. I'm looking forward to learning more about tree collards and your nursery. And so what's going on in your garden and nursery right now out in mid-March in zone 9B, right? That's where you're at?
I think so. It's between 9A and 9B. Yeah, it's pretty wild right now. Like it snowed yesterday or the day before.
Yeah.
And then it's just been bitter cold and more rain and more storms coming. And then it's already been in the 70s and it's going to be in the 70s next week. So it's a confusing time for the plants, like in terms of maybe blooming too soon because of some of the heat we had. All the plants seem to be a little stressed and confused by the wild temperature swings from 30 degrees to 70, all in a short time frame. But yeah, I'm not. This is the time of year generally where the tree collards start to bloom, so it's harder for me to propagate new plants. Yeah,
they're starting to bloom this time of year.
Yeah, even the purple tree collards. So I have very few varieties that aren't blooming. Taunton Dean is one of them. That's very shy to bloom. It hasn't bloomed for me yet. I have a variety I came up with called Violet Queen. That's some of the plants are blooming a little bit. Some of them are not. And the purples are scant bloomers. But some of the other ones are just going for it. They look like broccoli right now.
Interesting. So. Yeah, that's crazy how early they're starting to do that. talking about the blooming and the flowering patterns of tree collards was something that I really wanted to get into a little bit later for sure. But that's really interesting that they're doing it so early, and it's not as opposed to other types of kale that you might get that you expect that to happen midsummer or late summer. Yeah, so that's pretty interesting. I was not aware of that. But before I forget, I was watching your YouTube videos, and you have a really interesting, like a pretty catchy banjo tune for your intro. Do you play the banjo, or is that somebody you know? Or I'm really into bluegrass, so I was interested.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. I have a banjo. It was my dad's. He played the banjo. It's on my to-do list to learn the banjo. I have Banjo for
Okay.
Dummies over there. But no, it's just one of those stock songs that you can choose from for
Oh,
free. So
okay. Well,
yeah.
I like it. I like it anyway. Okay. Well, so you've been in the permaculture, like edible landscape design business for a while. Can you share a little bit more about that garden design business that you had before you started Project Tree Collard? I was kind of interested because you did that for so long. Like, what was that all about?
Yeah, well, I went to Merritt College in Oakland and studied landscape design and construction. So that included even like deck design and full-on drawings. That was in the day where actually I'm not sure if it was even an option then to do it on CAD, like on the computer. So we hand drew like full-on blueprint drawings to scale of projects and things like that. And it started off mostly ornamental, even though I did study permaculture at Merritt College too. I was always trying to sneak more permaculture ideas into the landscapes, but not necessarily telling the clients about it. And it was just like my side little secret passion that I didn't really share that much with people. My garden was a 1/4 acre in Berkeley, and I would have like public tours. So I was
Oh,
very
wow.
open about my place, but for some reason with the clients, I was attracting generally older people who just wanted a beautiful garden, which is pretty common in Berkeley, just have really beautiful gardens if someone has the money to hire someone. And I wanted to imbue like an interest on their part in growing food and being connected to something that they could eat from their beautiful garden, like persimmons or
Yeah.
artichoke plants or something. But a lot of people didn't get super into it. So
Oh, really?
I snuck a lot of tree collards in there, and they're like,
Yeah.
"What is this?
Okay.
Whatever. It looks weird."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
oh.
I was wondering if it was like that, or I don't know if you're familiar with Jessie Bloom, if you've heard that name before. Um,
Mm-mm.
she's a she's a relatively big name in the permaculture world, but she has like an edible landscape design business, and I didn't know if what you were
Mm.
doing was anything like that. So for those of us the listeners who may not have heard much about tree collars before, they've heard of them, but they don't really know much about them. Can you just give us a just like a really brief introduction to tree collars and how they're different or similar to like the normal like types of kale you might buy and have in your annual vegetable garden?
Yeah, so they're very closely related. They're Brassica oleracea, the Latin name, but they're just a slightly different variety. And the main difference is that they're perennial. They'll just live for many, many years. I haven't met any tree collards that wanted to bloom and die. And that's a big confusion for a lot of people because they're like, what
Yeah,
is happening? My tree collard's blooming. I thought it was perennial, or they usually say it's bolting because that's what
right.
happens with
That was
kales.
always my
Hmm.
my confusion with um whenever at least the kale that I've been used to growing is when it starts to produce flowers. That's like a sign of like heat stress where it's ready to start reproducing, and then the
Hmm.
plant seems to go downhill from there. But it seems like with tree collards, it's not that's not the case.
Hmm. Yeah, it just
Okay.
has this life cycle where it, like I mentioned earlier, some bloom and some, bloom a lot and some barely bloom or don't bloom at all. So it just seems like part of the the cycle that if it's going to bloom, it blooms, and you remove the flowers at a certain point in time, depending on what your goals are. Like if you want to save the seed or you want to leave the beautiful mustard flowers on there for pollinators,
Yeah.
then you would leave them on for a certain amount of time and then eventually remove them either for collecting the seed or just because the flowers are spent and it looks weedy or ratty, or you're just wanting to get them back into leaf production, and they go back into leaf production.
Mm.
And
Okay.
then you have that until next year. Yeah.
Okay. So similar. So the blooming and the flowering is not necessarily a sign of stress. It's just that just like any other kind of perennial like woody plant or something, like it flowers at certain times, and that's just how the tree collards are in a
Yeah, and
way.
I look at it. At first I was like annoyed by it, and then I realized like this is amazing because it's giving us all this diversity with seed.
Yeah.
So the brassica family readily cross-pollinates with other members of the family. So I haven't gotten any amazing, really interesting, crazy mixes, but I have some friends that I've made through Instagram and whatnot who are like they had a mustard green cross-pollinate with tree
Oh
collards into a
wow.
really spicy, hot
I never thought about
tree
that.
collard.
That's pretty
Yeah,
wild. Yeah, the
yeah.
whole like Brassica oleracea, that species is just so bizarre. And like when I tell people about that, it's like, yeah, cabbage, broccoli, kale, they're all the same species, but what the tree collards are, it's like the variety is
Cephala.
Acephala. Yeah, Acephala. So
Hmm.
it's just so crazy that you have such a diversity of plants within this one species. I don't know if there's anything
Hmm.
quite like it. Is very interesting. So the perennial nature of tree collards, are they considered like a long-lived perennial, or what's like the longest running tree collard that you've heard of? Or like are we talking like
Hmm.
several years, like 10 years? Like it seems like one that you may need to like plan, like maybe like I don't know, just maybe 5 to 7 years, or what's the oldest one you've ever heard of?
I've heard of 20 years.
Really?
I
Wow.
haven't seen those in person. I've seen them in like magazine articles or something. Um, yeah, I think the oldest ones I've encountered are like 5 to 7 years. I
Okay.
pref I prefer not to have something live on and on and on and be 12, 15 feet tall and really, really scraggly and
Right.
woody and not productive. Plus, I'm doing it for propagation. That's
Hmm.
why I have the tree collards, is for the project tree collard. So I need to kill mine every 3 to 5 years and start over from their cuttings,
Okay.
basically.
There's not really is it just like really just gets more difficult to have them maintain a bushy kind of growth structure as they get taller? Is that kind of how it goes?
Hmm. They just get more and more woody and less
Okay.
leaves, and the leaves
Uh
get smaller over time. So,
okay.
like, there's one variety called Merit, which has, like, when it's young, like 2 foot leaves. And as the plant gets older,
Well,
they might be like this long. And that's not so enticing for cooking or whatever. Whereas when
sure.
they're young, you can do like use them as a wrap, like a gluten-free, like a low carb version
Okay.
of some kind of a burrito or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. That would be cool. Um yeah, that's a yeah, it's crazy to have like a 20-year-old tree collard. Have you done much research into like the historical use of tree collards? Like there's a pretty rich history of their use, right?
Hmm. Yeah. I've researched it and I feel really badly that I don't have an answer for you because I wish so badly I did. But what I'm
Huh.
hearing more and more is that it points to Africa, that
Mm,
enslaved people that came over to the US may well have had seeds in their hair and taken them with them because they took a lot of important plants from Africa and brought them over to the US. So it's Africa has a lot of varieties of closely related tree collard like plants,
Okay.
particularly in Ethiopia and I forget which countries, but I do have a number of customers from Africa ordering seeds because
Wow. Okay.
they want to make their population of plants more genetically diverse.
Okay. Okay. Cool. How would you say the flavor of the tree collards kind of compares to some of those other types of typically grown in an annual garden context type of kales?
Well, I actually don't grow a lot of kale anymore
Okay. Okay.
because I have so many collards.
Right.
I'm a big fan of turnip greens for the
Okay.
bitterness and broccoli and a couple other brassicas, but I tend to not grow a lot of kale because I have so many collards. I find them more
Makes sense.
sweet
Mm.
than kale. Like kale can get more bitter, especially in the spring when it's starting to bloom. And I find tree collards to be more consistently sweet.
Okay.
My dog used to eat the midrib of the tree collard and didn't like the leaves. And
Huh.
one I was just like really curious why. And then I started eating just the midrib and I was like, it is so sweet. This dog is
Interesting.
onto something. Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
sweetest part. Yeah.
I guess that's a really big difference because that's often the most bitter part of other types of kales. So that's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. I'll have to
Yeah.
try
So
that. Yeah.
I've started using the center midrib in cooking more, as long as the tree
Interesting.
collard's kind of
Yeah.
younger. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a pro tip right there.
Hmm.
Um
Yeah, good
yeah,
fiber too.
sure. I'll need more of that. Yeah, I'm super excited to try out my collards this year. I was resisting because I'm also trying to propagate them out as well. So, um,
Right.
yeah. Um, so in your nursery, imagine it's like, would you say it's like kind of dominated by tree collards, or do you have lots of you grow medicinal plants as well? Um, if you had to think of like a perfect type of like your idea of a perfect like polyculture guild that involves tree collards, like whether it's like in a food forest setting or like maybe someone wants to have like an edible kind of perennials part of their garden area, what would you say?
Hmm.
What kind of species would you choose to have in like a your ideal polyculture guild?
Hmm. I have never thought about that because the way I tend
Oh,
to grow
okay.
them is in groups. I tend to grow them in groups and they're in a food forest, but the fruit trees are very young, so they're not providing the canopy yet.
Right.
And I just have like interplanted in and around the tree collards a lot of other things.
Mm,
But I would say something nitrogen fixing, like if there was a tree. Um, yeah, I do have one. I have like a Albizia jubilescens. I don't think it grows where you live, but it's like the
mm,
tree of happiness tree is one of the many names for that.
okay.
Mimosa is another name for it.
Oh, yeah, I'm familiar with mimosa.
Nitrogen fixer. It's a
Mm,
very thin tree, so it lets a lot of sun in, and you can plant like tree collards under there that could
okay.
benefit from the nitrogen. And yeah, I'm picturing my own garden, and then I have like nettle, stinging nettle, and calendula, and
Yeah.
um, comfrey under the tree. And there are many other things, but it seems to coexist really nicely.
Okay. Would
Mint
you
also.
Right, right. Yeah, you mentioned a lot of on your website you have a whole section on herbal allies that
Hmm.
people may consider to have planted along with their tree collards and many different mints. As far as the sun requirements for tree collards, would you say that full sun is going to do best, or that they'll also hack it in part sun conditions? Is that right?
Right. I think you're up near Seattle, sort of, but you're in a more
Yep.
mountainous area. In your
Yes.
climate, the
Or zone
summer,
7B.
you have. yeah, you have heat waves, but it's not crazy hot. But a lot
Mm-hmm.
of my customers are in places that are like sweltering hot places in the South. I've, people growing them in Florida and Texas and California, in different hot areas. Like my area is so hot. What I found is in the vegetable garden in the full sun, they did not do very well.
In
They
the
didn't
full
like the
sun.
summer.
Okay. So they
Yeah.
like a little bit of
So,
shade.
right. So I would say people who live in a more extreme climate, like Arizona, um, Texas, Florida, probably
Okay.
Georgia, California, often
Mm-hmm.
need to grow them intentionally in shade.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be through shade cloths or through like a food forest kind of situation,
Okay.
or shade from a mountain or whatever. Yeah.
Is that where you're using shade cloth? I watched one of your YouTube videos where you mentioned that you have like long stretches of temperatures well into the hundreds. Are you
Hmm.
using shade cloth primarily to cast shade over your tree collards, or what strategy are you using to achieve that?
No, I stopped growing them in the vegetable garden, which is where I was needing the shade cloth for things like tomatoes and peppers and
Okay.
raspberries and things. And then in the front, I have partial shade naturally from different evergreen trees, and I've planted a lot of fruit trees that are young. There was only one fruit tree there when I got
Mm-hmm.
there, and so I'm growing them in that partial shade there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so for getting into like a little bit of management with tree collards, because and you have a lot of information on this on your website and also on your YouTube channel that people could use as a reference. Some really good stuff on there. But you had mentioned kind of starting new plants around like 5 to 7, whenever your older plants are around 5 to 7 years old. Um, you also mention or talk about keeping plants shorter to maintain more of a bushy growth pattern, because I'm usually a person who just harvests like leaf by leaf and not just clipping back top growth, which
Hmm.
has been which is why a lot of mine are leggy.
Hmm.
And so that's something I need to practice this next year. What would be like your ideal height for tree collards? Like, will they just keep getting? Well, this like, what's the tallest one you've ever heard of or seen yourself? There's some pictures with you with they're taller than you in the background.
Oh yeah.
Um, and so that's pretty nuts. But like, what would be your ideal height for managing tree collards?
Well, where I live, we have high winds and we have snow and hail and
Yeah.
a lot of rain. So for me here, I think my ideal height would be 6 feet or under. So some of my varieties want to be taller, and I just make sure to keep pruning them down. So the opposite of what you're doing, uh, to keep them bushy and low so that they
Hmm.
can weather these conditions well. In Berkeley, that I think some of them got to 13 feet tall or something like that. I had to get on a
Yeah.
orchard ladder, like
Wow.
for pruning fruit trees and prune
Uh,
or harvest. Yeah, yeah,
okay.
and that's
Have
not
you?
practical.
No, no, I wouldn't think so. You heard of a walking stick kale?
Yes,
Is
yes.
that a tree collard?
It's more of a biannual, from is my understanding.
Oh,
I've actually
okay,
never grown them in
okay,
my garden, but it forms a very straight stick, about, I don't know, 4 inches in diameter, maybe three
yeah.
inches. And they used to use those as walking
All
sticks
right.
back in the day.
Hmm.
Um,
Do you think
yeah,
you could do that with an older tree collard stem? Do they get
make a
woody enough
stick.
to make a walking stick out of? Do you think?
Mine get very, very woody, but they tend to be branched because of the way I
Okay,
prune them. So,
sure.
so they start branching a foot off the ground usually. So it wouldn't be a
Okay,
good walking stick.
wouldn't be a very
Hmm.
good walking stick. Okay.
No.
Um, and so when you're cutting back the top growth, and one thing I did to manage one of my my perennial kales last year, it got really aphidy. Is I just cut all the growth off it. it was getting really aphidy and I couldn't control them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just cut all the greenery off it. It was just a stem sticking out of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
That is, it seems like tree collards could be managed in that way. I'm wondering, have you ever managed your tree collards that way?
Oh, that's a hard one. No, I've never cut them back like that. I usually just
Okay.
leave aphids. I've rarely had a really bad infestation of aphids, but I'm very fascinated by who comes into the rescue. So I
Mm,
like to just leave them, and I've noticed a lot of small birds coming to eat the aphids and other predator insects
mm,
coming in. So yeah, and lots of ladybugs. So I
right.
just kind of have let them do that. As far as cutting them back, might sound a little woo-woo, but I just kind of look at the plants and I'm like, what do these plants want? Can these plants tolerate? And maybe that's also my 20 years of landscaping experience on top of
Sure.
that.
Sure.
But I just kind of like look at it. Is this a vital bush? Is this bush like really want to be cut down lower and harder, or should I give it a break?
Right. No, that makes
So
sense.
that's
I don't think that's
that's
woo
how I
woo.
do
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right. Um, Other types of uh like pests or like fungal like fungal diseases you might worry about. One thing that comes to mind is something that you hear about when you're planting brassicas in the same place over and over again in a garden setting is club root fungus. And I'm not sure if that's just
Hmm.
something you just have to know if that persists in your area, and then that'll be something you're concerned with. But I'm wondering if you've ever experienced that, or if you ever have concern with seeing as tree collards are a brassica, having them in the ground in the same places for so long, year after year.
Hmm. I like to rotate crops. So if I have had, let's say, purple tree collards in a certain area for many years, when I do decide to replant them from their cuttings, I choose a different place that might have been um, berries or something else. Yeah, try to mix it up, definitely.
Mm.
But I haven't encountered that fungus. I have heard of it,
I've not
but I
either. I was
haven't.
just curious. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you had mentioned cuttings. I'm familiar with using cuttings and have grown many kales from not just tree collards from cuttings, but I feel like a lot of people probably don't even realize that you can grow kale from the cuttings of the offshoots of
Hmm.
the branches. I'm wondering if you can
Hmm.
just give a brief overview of like what options people have for propagating kale that doesn't involve seed. We'll talk about growing from seed in a little bit, but I'm wondering if you can give people just a little bit of a primer on that.
Right. So my experience is mostly with perennial kales and not the annual kales, but basically I just take the tip growth that has the leaves, the newest growth, and cut that, and then I remove all the leaves because I'm in an extreme climate. I don't want the cold or the heat to make it harder for it to get roots, and then I just root them in a nice potting soil that drains well in either the greenhouse, depending on the time of year, or in a shade structure outside if it's a warmer time of year. And yeah, it's very successful doing that. Yeah,
Yeah. Is
yeah.
there an ideal like size, like diameter, length of a like an ideal cutting from tree collards?
Yeah, someone just sent me a really special tree collard from Arizona the other day,
Hmm.
and I didn't take the time to explain to him how to send them to me properly without harming them, and I didn't explain how to wrap them in moist towels, so they didn't arrive in very good condition. Yeah, I prefer the tips. I think the tips just have a much higher success rate. So, but some people will take like a very long cuttings. This is over a foot, and then they'll divide it into separate cuttings. So you could
Hmm.
get four out of that. And I just think it depends on, as a nursery, whether you want to start off with a taller plant, then you need a taller cutting. And if you want a shorter plant, then you need a shorter cutting. So I think it could be anywhere between 3 inches and what's the tallest I've done? Maybe 18 inches. But
Oh,
that's
okay.
unwieldy in a 1 gallon
Right.
container to have this very
I can
leggy
imagine.
tall stalk.
Yeah.
But the special tree collards from Phoenix that were sent to me were mostly not the tips, and some of it was just too woody and like,
Okay.
3 inches thick.
Oh,
And
wow. Yeah.
some of them are starting to get moldy and not
Okay.
don't even have a chance to root. So it's too bad.
Okay. So would you say more like well, for me personally, I would say like anything like a bigger diameter than a pencil, like maybe like better would be like a dry
Hmm.
erase marker or less. Like when you get past dry erase marker, it's kind of diameter, it might be getting into like more like too big. You might want to consider something smaller.
Hmm.
Would you agree with that?
I agree with the smaller dimensions. I have
Yeah,
done
just it's kind of
plenty
like a
of
ballpark.
tips.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done plenty of tips of like the merit tree collards where they're like two or 3 inches in diameter and just
Oh,
this
really? Wow.
tall. And I can
Okay.
do that in like even
Really
like a
beefy
4 inch
ones.
container, really
Okay.
beefy. And when they start leafing out,
Wow.
it's just like these gorgeous
Okay.
cabbage-like plants. Yeah.
Okay. I guess that goes back to what you were saying, just spending time with the plant and like you can kind of tell by looking at it. It's like, oh, do you think like would you be able to handle this? Like how vital are the stalks? Like that makes
Hmm.
sense to me. Yeah. But 4 inches,
Hmm.
well, that's crazy. um have you ever experimented with other types of like layering strategies with collards? Like I know
Hmm.
I've done some like ground layering with some of the perennial kales I've
Hmm.
had. Have you ever like messed around with air
Hmm.
layering or anything like that?
Not professionally, but just
Yeah.
personally. Yeah, like um they do it all the time naturally. Like
Right.
you just if you just let them do their little loop-de-loop thing, I call it, and then they just where it's touching the ground, the last loop, U-turn or whatever. And if you just stick an irrigation pin for fun,
Hmm.
then you can roots come and then you can just separate it from the mother plant. So I've done a lot of stuff like that, but just for fun or propagating for a friend or something. Not
Right.
that's not how I do it professionally because it's just not.
Yeah.
It's too difficult, and it's also very easy to break branches when you're bending them down to the ground.
Hmm.
And I haven't bothered with air layering. Like I imagine you could tie around it some medium that stays moist and is in plastic and it could totally root, I'm sure.
Yeah. I'm
But
sure
it's
too.
just too much bother for me.
Right.
If I
No,
have a
air
really
laying
rare
is
plant
it's
or
a pain.
something, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, it's there's lots of other ways you could do it other than cuttings. If they just wanted like two plants instead of one plant, they could perhaps consider doing ground layering if it was already touching the ground
Mhm,
that
mhm,
way.
mhm,
So I kind of wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about um, some of the breeding work that you've been doing with tree collards. So your original plants were from a somewhat similar climate. I mean, I know Berkeley is more. It's like I mean, you're in like the Bay Area, so it's maybe a little bit more moderated compared to where
mhm,
you are now. I'm not sure. I'm just kind of
mhm,
assuming.
mhm.
Uh, how much breeding work would you say that you've done with the tree collards, and do you feel like you've like made some headway in the generations of plants that you've grown out from seed, as far as making them more adapted to where you are
Huh.
now?
Yeah, yeah, I feel that way. Some of them I'm still, watching closely, like, "Hey, what's going on with you? Like, what's up with you?" I came up with, like a green variety of tree collard that seems to stay very, very short and doesn't seem to bloom. I think I've
Mm,
been growing it about 3 years. I started with one seedling that seeded itself in my garden as a volunteer, and I really liked it, and I started propagating it, and now I have, like, a little patch of maybe 5 or 6 of them, and they've been there a few years, and so far, no blooming, but they're not robust. They're not getting tall. They're just
interesting.
kind of but they're beautiful. I haven't even eaten them. But
Okay.
I'm just, like, not feeling like, "Oh, that's not a really useful plant, and it's not very practical for nursery business because it doesn't seem to make a lot of offshoots.
Mhm.
So there's things like that where, oh yeah, I could come up with a new variety that seems to have a lot of desirable characteristics. However, is it practical to propagate it and distribute it or whatever? Or do I want to? Or is that like a
Mhm.
good thing for the world or not? So I've tried to only put out plants that I think have something really special. And like two really good examples of that were from seedlings in my garden in Berkeley. And they both have done fantastic up here in the extremes. And they're Big Blue and Jolly Green. And they're very
Okay.
different from each other. Big Blue is much shorter. It's like maxes out around 3-4 feet, and Jolly Green can get really tall.
Okay.
And but they're just both really great plants. Yeah, I mean, there's a part of me that just loves the idea of, since I'm selling plants to homeowners and garden enthusiasts, to think of these plants in their edible landscape. Like what would this plant do and be like? And I don't think it's always practical to have a 12-foot tall, giant, scraggly tree collard.
Yeah.
A lot of people
Yeah,
have
for
like a
sure.
little patio garden or something. So
Mhm.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I try to have something for everybody.
Sure, sure. And you do have several different varieties you offer it on projecttreecolor.org. I wonder, can you just give us just like a super brief introduction to the type, like the different varieties that you do have there or that you offer? Is that possible?
Yeah, if I remember them all.
Oh, that's
Purple
fine.
tree collards are the classic. That's what I started off with. They're purple, especially more in the cool times of the year. They're quite green in the summer, but have purple stalks. They're very, very sweet. They have a sort of a nutty flavor that kind of makes them stand out from the other varieties. They also have like a white chalky coating on them, which when I'm working with them a lot, propagating them, like it comes off on my hands. So if I'm propagating
Mhm.
them for a long time, my hands will have this like white coating, and that coating is for like drought adaptation.
Mhm.
So it's really drought tolerant and wonderful in the garden. So that's probably the most popular.
Yeah, they
And
call
then
that
there's
white botanically that's called a glaucus, like a glaucus
right.
covering. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then there's merit tree collards I mentioned earlier with these huge green leaves. The stalks are very, very thick over time, and it probably looks the most like a walking stick kale of all the types because it grows very, very fast and very columnar and upright. It's generally not super branchy, although with my pruning technique, you can make them much shorter and branchier. And that's a good green one. It's probably not my favorite for various reasons, but I like it a lot. And then I mentioned, oh, dinosaur tree collard was from Rebecca Newburn at Richmond Grows Seed Library.
Not to be
And
confused with
what?
dinosaur kale, like the because that's a typical
Well,
one. That is the same one.
that's what it is. Oh,
Oh,
well,
okay.
no, it cross-pollinated. So her dinosaur kale bloomed at the same time as her purple tree collards, and this was the
Oh,
result of that. That's
okay.
what the
So they are
story is
different.
on.
Okay.
They are, yeah. And it
Okay.
tends to look more like dinosaur kale, but not as crinkly.
Okay.
Um, and it has a sort of a bushy, small habit. It generally grows about 2 feet tall, so not super tall unless it's blooming. Um, and that one's a heavy bloomer, kind of like dinosaur kale. And then there's Jolly Green tree collards that came up near the rabbit hutch in Berkeley.
Mhm.
And I would feed that a lot to the rabbit. I'm like, I don't know what this tree collard is, but it's really, really productive. And that one just goes nuts. Here they want to be 6 feet tall all the time. I'm constantly cutting them um, just to keep them from breaking. It's probably the most like a traditional collard green in the South, like the annual ones that everyone
Mhm.
wants. So just the leaf looks the most similar, and it has a similar mild flavor to like the annual collards. And then Big Blue is looking a little more like a giant dinosaur kale. Like it's very long, large, wide leaves, sort of a blue-green. Very beautiful plant. It's a medium bloomer in the spring. Great for cooking. That I do kind of the mid-rib when I'm cooking it in the
Okay.
meals. I do take that rib off because it tends to be more tough, but that's a nice, more compact tree collard. Let's see. One new one is purple. Sorry, Violet Queen. So new one's Violet Queen.
Okay.
And it's a lot like a purple tree collard. Like it's very violety purple stems, but green leaves all year. Like they don't turn purple in the winter. And that one blooms less. So it's got to be a close relative to the purple tree collard. It was an accidental seedling again. It has flatter, larger leaves than a purple tree collard. And the plants seem to be more pest resilient. Like it's just been really more pest free than the other varieties. So that's one reason I like it a lot.
And what was the name of that one again? The Violet
And
Green? Violet
Queen.
Violet Queen. Okay.
Violet Queen.
Okay.
And I have Green Queen, which
Okay.
is a gorgeous green tree collard with very ruffly edges, and the midrib, like the doesn't really have a big midrib, but it's like all these veins, and it looks like a river delta almost.
Wow.
Sort of reminds me of chard a little bit with the leaves, but that was gifted to me by a customer from Southern California, and so I've been growing it here for a number of years, and that's just another beautiful shorter one. In his garden in Southern California, it got really, really big, but he's in a very different climate. Up here, it tends to be around 3-4 feet tops.
Okay.
And his were like 6-8 feet, something like that.
Wow.
And a very, very new one that I'm still a little experimenting with, and I don't have a great supply of them. They're called Purple Magic. It's the darkest purple tree collard I've ever seen.
Wow.
It was again a seedling, and it's pretty purpley in the summer even.
Seedling
And in the
from
winter, it's
your
just
nursery or from somebody else? From your nursery?
from mine.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
And it's just very, very dark purple. It's just breathtaking, especially at this time of year. Yeah.
It's too hard. Like I try not to blow my plant budget this year, but I was looking at your website today. I was like, how much more should I dump this year? I don't know if
I'm sold out of everything pretty much.
Okay.
So.
Well, I probably won't be able. I'll probably be unsuccessful in resisting. So
yeah,
that's cool.
And then I have Taunton kale from England.
Right. Yeah, I got some of those from you
And I
last
think
year.
that's really tasty. I really like those. They're very tasty. I think when they're babies, they can look a lot like a purple tree collard, but in the garden, they really don't. They're way less purple. But I think they probably do very differently in different places. Like I wouldn't choose that one necessarily for really hot climates.
Sure.
I've got to keep them in a fair amount of shade.
Okay. Yeah, so people buy these from all over. Like you mentioned, you get customers from Africa, even like other continents, and like how adapt. Like it seems like the tree collards are extremely adaptable. Like what is like like you probably get a lot of feedback, I imagine, from customers. What's like the coldest and hottest place you've ever heard someone growing them? If you've gotten that kind of feedback.
Well, I live in a very hot summer place, but
Yeah, I imagine.
slightly
Yeah.
hotter would be like
So,
Las Vegas.
sure.
Yeah, like high desert or something, Phoenix.
Right.
Yeah, places like that. And then, I mean, as far as people keeping them outdoors and perennial,
Right.
I don't know my zones super well, like all
Oh, that's
throughout the
fine.
United States, but yeah, I would say like Michigan
Mhm.
or
Would you say you could pretty much grow
Illinois.
grow them anytime, like any place in like the continental U.S.?
Not as a perennial,
Not as a
no.
perennial.
And
Yeah.
the only variety that I think is pretty sure to do well in the lowest zones would be 5 and 6 would be
Okay.
Michigan tree collards.
Okay. Well,
And
that's good for people to know. Yep.
other than that, other than that, like to not risk having them killed, I think it would be 8A and B. But you're in
Okay.
7B.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're hacking it here.
It
So maybe,
depends.
yeah.
Mhm.
Imagine if it's a little colder, you maybe want to have them in a some under some sort of protection if you insist on having them
Mhm.
outside. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, that's good to
Yep.
know. But I mean,
A lot of
that's a
people
pretty
are talking
wide
about
range. Yeah.
yeah. And a lot of people are talking about mulching really, really heavily and, strategically placing them where they get, some sort of a radiant heat or little
Sure.
lights in the winter, like little Christmas lights around their plants or whatever. I can't be
Yeah.
bothered with all of that. It's just like
Yeah,
you
it's
gotta
dedication.
live and survive, or
Right.
you're not my plant.
Do you remember turning the Christmas lights on around the kale? Like, I don't have time for that. Sure, I understand. Cool.
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to talk a little bit about Project Tree Collard, like the business. Um,
Mhm.
do you remember and you on your blog, on your website, you kind of outline a lot of like the history and things and some like the first things, but um do you remember the first tree collard you ever sold online? Like what was that experience like? Was that have you like had you sold plants before? I mean, maybe from having like the gardening design business, I'm not sure if you worked with nurseries and sold plants that you grew or anything like that, but what was that experience like for
Mhm.
you for like a business that you were a part of creating and like someone's buying your stuff?
Yeah, I co-created it with, um, a boyfriend I had at the time, and so we were very non-attached. We were just like, "Wow, tree collards are really hard to get even in the Bay Area with lots and lots of nurseries and, like, the perfect climate for them." And, that nobody consistently carries these, and we saw on blogs and things, people are always asking, like, "Where can I get some cuttings? Where can I get a plant? Where?" So we were just like, "Ah, what the heck, we'll just try it," without a lot of thought. So it was just purple tree collards,
Mm,
plants, and cuttings. And I don't remember the first sale. I have no idea who that person was, but
sure.
I did propagate plants for my landscaping business just to sell to my customers directly, not to
Okay.
nurseries. So I was used to like the joy of growing things. Like, I mean, you can get addicted to propagating, and maybe you're having that experience too, but
Yeah.
once you're into propagating, you just wanna propagate everything, and you almost have to, like, tie your hands behind your back, like, "No more propagating. I don't
Yep.
like,
I
gotta
understand.
stop," you know?
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
for me, it was just fun, like, "Yeah, let me just try this out and see how it goes," and it was so the whole time, all 10 years I've been doing this, it's been a steep learning curve. There's always things that shift and change,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I totally get it, especially with the getting addicted to propagating things. You know, it's like, was it 2 years ago? Like I discovered, like I have nowhere left that makes sense to plant chestnuts. Like,
Mhm.
like, like okay, I grew out 100 chestnut trees, and like I could have grown out 1,000, but like I can't. It's not as easy to sell them, or like, yeah, I get
Yep.
it. It's like a packet of like a half ounce of mulberry seeds, like hundreds of trees. Like, what am I gonna do with those? Like, I'll figure it out when they're grown. Like, I don't know. It's just growing them is fun. I get, so I
Mhm.
get it for sure.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and also on your blog, you mentioned about like how like the first few years were pretty quiet, and then all of a sudden it just exploded one year. Um, were you doing any like intentional type of marketing at that time, or like even before that time? Like, um, how were you getting the word out about Project Tree Collard? Were you
Mhm.
doing were you worried about like SEO? Were you getting like that technical about things, or were you just doing
Hmm.
flyers or farmers markets? Like, what was your? Did you have a strategy? And it's fine
My
if you didn't.
strategy has been just fly by by the night or
Yeah.
whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. No marketing. I've never marketed. I've used social media, a Facebook page, Project Tree Collard, an Instagram page, Project Tree Collard. I didn't even start Instagram till 2020. That is the year it blew up. So I can't take credit for that. That was COVID. And
Sure.
everybody was stuck at home and wanting to grow food and not wanting to wait in lines at the store. And where I lived, you had to wait several hours in a grocery store line, and often the shelves were empty.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was very hard to get food. So I was giving away tree collards, like boxes of them to like the
Okay.
community and neighbors and everyone.
Awesome.
But anyway, um, yeah, I haven't been into marketing. I have paid attention to SEO, but since tree collards are not a super popular item, there's not a lot of people
Yeah.
to compete with. That
Sure.
it's yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, it's word of mouth. It's a lot of like on the shipping app I use, ShipStation, you can kind of see like what percentage you have of repeat customers versus new customers. And there's a
Sure.
lot of repeat customers. There are some really tried and true people that keep coming back, and they might go in fits and spurts, but I think some of
Sure.
the customers have come back over an 8-year time period or
Okay.
6-year time period, and they they're really doing something with them,
Mm.
you know. I don't know what they're up to.
Mm. So you're strictly online sales. Do you ever do any like local markets, farmers market kind of
Mm-mm,
deals, or okay,
mm-mm.
okay,
Yeah, there's someone in my community who sells tree colored plants from my seeds. She buys my seeds and then she propagates them and
okay.
sells them at the grocery store. So it was really surreal the time I went to the grocery store and the person in front of me had on their belt like a big blue tree collard. I'm like, I came up with that.
Well,
And here it is
like, hey,
in
I
the
made
grocery
that. I
store.
grew that. That's my collards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that
That
is
was
pretty
really
special.
trippy.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really cool. That is really cool. Oh, before I forget, are you familiar with uh the kaleidoscope kale, the Grex perennial kale, or
Mm-hmm.
Chris
Mm-hmm.
Homanics and his kind of breeding
Mm-hmm.
program?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, do you feel like you know enough to kind of speak on that? Like, do you have any of those of that genetics on your in your nursery?
Yeah, I did grow some of them in my food forest, and I think they're
Okay,
very beautiful plants and they do well. I think they're quite cold adapted, which is
they
great
are. He's
because
in my neck of the
I
woods.
hear, yeah, I hear a lot about his plants from customers or his seeds and people's experiences with them. And people in cold climates are having a lot of success with them.
Yeah.
Um, I find they bloom really heavily for me,
How long ago
but
were you growing the seed, by the way? Do you remember? Do you
the
remember?
last couple years, like
Okay,
I still have
okay,
some seed and it might be 3 years old or something.
okay. Because I
Yeah.
talked on the phone with him for probably like an hour last year, and he was telling me that that last year's generation was probably his best one. So it'd be interesting
Uh-huh.
to see how much that
Yeah.
blooming has been suppressed.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You should have him on the show.
Yeah. He's on my list. Yeah. I kind of gotta get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Uh, it's on my list.
Mm-hmm.
Um. So with having your business be primarily online, um, like you had grown plants and given them like locally to customers for your garden design business, but like what was the learning curve like shipping plants and plant material? Um, was that did you see that as a particular challenge, or did you kind of was it not a problem for you? Like for me, like figuring out like shipping weights and like are you going to do a flat rate shipping, or like how am I going to make sure these make it to the customers in a good condition? Was that somewhat of a challenge for you, or did you was it easy for you?
No, it's not been easy. So some of the results of trial and error over the years have to do with understanding the speed at which they need to get to the destination. So by and large, I'm doing priority mail for live plants, and first class mail seems to be okay for the cuttings. But on my order page, I have a huge disclaimer about I am not responsible once they leave my farm for whatever
Yeah.
happens in the post, because, and I talk about ordering at, like, it's their responsibility to know when to order for their area, in that I don't know what it's like in such and such Georgia or such and such
Right.
Arkansas. Like, I don't have the app on my chart that's going to, like, some really big nurseries know what's going on and they won't ship until a certain frost date has passed or whatever. But I don't have that. I'm a tiny nursery. So I give the responsibility to the customer to know, like, if it's going to sit in your hot mailbox or freeze in your mailbox,
Mm-hmm.
like, it's not a good time for you to order.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that's that. Yeah, for those of you listening who are thinking about starting a plant nursery, that is something to consider right there. Like disclaimers on your website, and I know personally with mine, there's a little bit of a struggle with like, well, how much disclaimer do you want to put on there? Like, are you like, is it so much disclaimer that you're like scaring away a customer almost? It's like, oh, I have like all these,
Mm-hmm.
I have to think of for myself. Like, I have to make these decisions for myself. Like, aren't you supposed to know? You're the one giving me these plants. And I think I like the way you're going about it there, and I think I'm going to follow suit. And like, yeah, I mean, like I'm like we're small nurseries, like we don't have the time, and we're knowledgeable of our areas, but like I can't tell you what to do on the other side of the country. Like that's you gotta know that. And so
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
you're probably still gonna have people complain anyway about things, even
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's
So
what one friend told me, who had nothing to do with plants for a living, but he's like, you will always have unhappy customers. If you're in customer service, if you have a product, there will always be unhappy people. And it's funny because, like, the amount I can sometimes get fearful when I get emails from customers. And I would say 90% of the emails are just glowing. Like, these are the
yeah,
best online plants I've ever ordered. They're in such good condition. They look at this and they'll send pictures, like, this came out of the box looking like this. Like, they're so happy. And it's just a very, very small percent of unhappy people. But just having that experience of people get very blamey and mean about
sure.
it and demand, or I'll never order from you again kind of
Mm-hmm.
attitude. I'm a very sensitive person. That's been a challenge for me to to take on that kind of energy my way, and I have to do some breathing and clearing the energy and
Mm-hmm.
look into what I'm responsible for. Did I do a good job? Because I have a lot of integrity. Did I uphold my end of the deal?
Sure.
And yeah, so it's not easy shipping live plants. You're at the mercy of the shipping, the weather, the carrier, the the things we can control are the padding, the size of the box, how to
Yeah.
keep them from sliding around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
So if you had to give any advice to somebody, that's something that not a whole lot of people talk about. Whenever you're running a plant nursery, is dealing with like how do you deal with customers who are not satisfied with their orders. As you just mentioned, you take it on pretty emotionally, but as far as like your correspondence with them, like are there any times where you may not like even respond if it's just like I've not experienced like anybody being like super crazy or something, I don't know, but I imagine it's more just kind of acknowledging their frustration and like how much of a I'm sure it's a case by case basis, but like um how do you deal with the negative emails that you get
Hmm.
even though they are rare.
Hmm. Well, this is the realm of personal growth for me, and this is
Okay.
a good thing and a good edge, is listening to them, making sure you hear what their complaints are and taking that in and acknowledging it to them, that you hear their upsetness or whatever, addressing their issue, and then explaining anything about the plant or the postal service or the weather or whatever is coming to play in it. Yeah, it's definitely been challenging, and I have had a few crazy people like ordering huge amounts of plants for me, hundreds of dollars,
Oh well.
order after order after order, and then like doing a charge back through PayPal or yeah, just kind of making my life miserable for a little while. Yeah.
Yeah, that's got to be a hard situation for
Unfortunately,
sure.
that's happened because I've been doing it 10 years. So, yeah.
Right, and you're not going to avoid getting into those kind of situations. Like I said, if you're in customer
Yeah.
service, it's going to be unhappy
Right.
customers. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's a good thing for everyone to just keep in mind if you're going to be getting into this kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all right. Well, I only have one last question for you. Is about like the nursery, like doing this kind of work. Like looking back, or is there any advice or things you would have done differently when you started, or like any tips for someone who is just trying to get started with this, whether they're specializing in something or having a diverse palette of plants they're trying to grow in a nursery?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I was curious if you have if you've ever had any reflections on that.
Yeah, I think the big question would be whether or not to do an online nursery where you're shipping
Mm,
versus a local nursery or delivering around to other nurseries. And I think if you have a niche and there's like a high demand for your plant and it's rare, your or whatever your plants are, and you're growing something that's really different, like the cultivars that you have are just not available other places or the specific varieties, then it makes sense to do an online nursery. But otherwise, I think selling locally makes a lot more sense to me because people can walk through your plants and look at them and see the price and decide whether
hmm
they want to pay that or not. And it's not, the plants aren't going through the stress of being packaged up in a dark box for a bit of time. Um, so so I think that's the main consideration. In my case, it's been very clear that doing tree collards and creating new varieties is a niche that is high demand nationally for that. And I have a lot of European customers buying seeds these days, which is interesting. Well, Australian and
Oh
European
wow.
and from some other countries randomly,
Yeah.
but I only ship seeds internationally. So I feel like I've got this mission to share tree collards and really be dedicated to that and that specific little niche and really just do my best at it and get the word out there about these, really cool perennial plants that I think should be a part of every perennial food foresty or even vegetable garden, even annual vegetables. Like, why not throw perennials in there like tree collards? So I feel like good in my mission and like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And I guess when I have those tough customers, that's what I have to come back to is like, I wanted to do this. I chose to do this. And,
Right.
95% of the people are just so grateful. I mean, the amount of thank yous and appreciation I get from customers is really, really great.
Imagine.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good place to a good ending note there for sure.
Mhm.
Um, all right, y'all. If you're looking for tree collards this year, go ahead and go to projecttreecollard.org, and maybe if you're lucky, something will be available for purchase there. Do you how do you like periodically update your inventory? Um, like how often does your inventory update if something's
Probably
sold
once
out?
a week.
Okay,
Yeah, once a
that's good
week
for people to know.
or twice a week because yeah, things are in different stages. Like I just noticed today that the Taunton Deans are, I thought they were weeks out, but some of them are rooted already. And I'm like, wow, so I'm going to be able, there's a waiting list. So I will be able to activate that waiting list in the next probably week or, definitely in the next 2 weeks. And they're looking good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right, y'all. Well, thanks so much for listening in. Thanks, Sequoiah, for being with us. We will see you all in the next show.
Thank you.